Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. If you're just logging on, welcome to HR Exchange Live Future of Work. Our next presentation is entitled How to Inspire Rather Than Stereotype Gen Z. I am very honored to introduce to you our next distinguished speaker, Cylient CEO and HR Exchange Network Advisory Board member, Diana Anderson. Diana, take it away.
Thanks so much, Mason. I'm excited to be here today and to be able to engage people in this really important conversation about how we're going to welcome Gen Z into. At Cylient, our sole focus is integrating coaching into the cultures of organizations. And as such, we tend to find those places where organizational cultures tend to disconnect. And one of the most prevalent disconnects we see is in between generations. So introducing a new generation into the organization is an opportunity both to look back and think about what created some of the disconnects we currently experience, as well as looking forward to what we can do to really place the welcome mat firmly in front of Gen Z and welcome them into our organizations to be a productive and integrated part of our organizational family. So the first thing we want to do is kind of step back for a moment and think about what actually makes a new generation new. And what makes a new generation new is a new shared worldview that they bring that integrates them and that makes them a unique group. So let's step back for just a moment and talk about worldviews. This is a concept that we introduced in our Coaching in the Moment workshop. And the idea is that each of us has our own unique window into the world, which we would call a worldview. And that worldview is wired up through all of the experiences that each of us has in a lifetime. So based on what we experience, we decide what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, what's exciting, what isn't. And as a result of our worldviews, we decide how to interact in the world. While worldviews can be individual, they also can be shared. And so when the events of the world or advances in the world give a whole group of people a shared experience that changes how they look at the world, we give that new generation a new name. And that's exactly what's happened with Gen Z. Changes in social media, being raised by Gen Xers rather than by baby boomers, all of these things and much more has shaped their worldview so that they see things a little bit differently than the generation before them. So one of the things we want to look at is, why is it that we get these generational differences? And if you think about it, the stereotypes that crop up as a result of these generational differences begin often when these two generations meet each other. And in that meeting point, they take a look at each other and notice that they approach things differently, they think about things differently, and often that makes people a little uncomfortable. And as a result of those differences, rather than getting curious about them, we have a tendency to take these little pieces of different approach and turn them into stories and that explain why we think those folks are different. And as a result, we often turn those stories into labels, and those labels become stereotypes. So if you think about our millennial generation, they got pretty well labeled as being lazy, unprepared, entitled, maybe even lacking in loyalty. And as a result of that, it created a lot of tension. And the stories that persisted kept us from being able to see what was really unique and different about these folks who had joined our workforce. I would have to say that I encountered stereotypes of millennials that were so solid that even when I encouraged people to notice what was unique or different about some millennials, that they were unable to do it. It was shocking at times just how persistent these stories were and just how limiting they were for everybody, because it hampers people's ability to learn with and from each other if we are only looking and thinking about a story and not the unique individual before us. I think what really captures the essence of this is a story that was related to me in one of our workshops. And it pointed both towards where the limitations had come from, but also, I think, opened the door to thinking about what we could do differently as a result of them. And this was a story where one of our participants was telling us how he had been sharing a really common stereotypic story about millennials and their need, he felt, to get trophies, at the end of anything that they did. But it just so happened the day he was telling that story that there was a millennial present who looked at him and said, we never asked for those trophies. You gave them to us. And I'll tell you, that just caused silence in the workshop as people reflected on for a moment on why we actually did that. Why did we as baby boomer parents decide that we should give everybody a trophy? And I reflected upon my own experience. And I remember graduating from public school, which in Canada is graduating from a school that would have taken you from K to 8. So this is a group of people that have been together for 9 years. And on graduation night, one guy named Jeff took home, I would say, about 2/3 of the awards that were given that night. And I have to tell you, it left the rest of us feeling unseen, unrecognized, really appreciated for the unique contributions we had made during all those years together. And I think collectively, we wanted something different for our children. So we gave them trophies so that they could feel like they were always honored for winning, regardless of what had happened. And as a result, they did feel special, and they did feel like they could do anything, and they did experience believing in themselves in a way that perhaps we had not been encouraged to. And I think one of the things that we didn't do a great job of was figuring out how to honor that specialness that we had created when we brought them into the workforce. And so instead of changing how we approached them, we created some labels that limited their ability and in some ways diminished the very things that we had worked so hard to build. So we've got a chance for a do-over because Gen Z is coming in, and they have got some really, really special qualities that I think we really are going to want to honor and bring in. They are a creative, entrepreneurial crew that are natives in the social media world. In fact, 25% of them post original video every week, and 65% create and share content weekly. Those are folks who want to have their voices heard, and they want to have these voices heard in a way that makes a difference in the world. They care deeply about causes, and they are very much about giving back and making the world a better place. I can't think of more qualities that we really need to bring online right now. So this is a great time to ask ourselves, how can we do this differently? Now, I could share with you what I think we should do differently, but I think it might be a little bit more interesting for you to have your own reflection around this. And so to invite you into that reflection, we're going to do a listening exercise. And you're going to hear from two characters. So Devin is a Gen Z team member. He's pretty new to a new team that's having a lot of trouble getting projects completed on time. And he's got an idea to help address this, and he's going to share that with his manager, Tina. And as you listen to the conversation, I want you to think about what messages Devin might take away from this interaction, and also what stereotypes might be beginning to be formed for Tina as she is in conversation with him. And I'll debrief this with you after we're done listening.
Hey, Tina, do you have a minute? I wanted to run an idea by you. I really think it'll help to address the communications problems we're having on our team.
What problems are you referring to?
Well, the fact that we spend most of our meeting time updating each other and debating rather than moving ideas forward. That's why we're so far behind on our projects.
I see. Well, what do you have in mind exactly?
Well, when I was in college, we used a platform that enabled the people in our group projects to collaborate in real time. We were able to share ideas and comment on them outside of team meetings. You can even install the app and contribute from your phone. It really helped us get a lot done faster.
Sounds great, Devin. but I can't even get our team to respond to emails in real time.
Yeah, but that's the problem.
Look, the real problem we have to deal with right now is that we're way behind on the Elmira and the Oakdale projects. We need to get those wrapped before we can talk about anything else. Let's table this conversation until then, okay?
Sure.
All right, then. Make sure that you coordinate with Xavier and Jenny before you send me your final analysis for Oakdale. I need it by tomorrow afternoon at the latest.
Right. I'll try to track them down and get that to you.
Great. Thanks.
All right, well, let's think about this for just a moment from Devin's point of view. What do you think his experience was as he walks away from this conversation? I think maybe he might feel a little discouraged from sharing ideas and observations in the future. I mean, they really weren't very welcomed. He also might feel frustrated. He's got this perfectly good idea to try to make things better for a team that's struggling, and he really didn't have that honored at all. He also may be kind of annoyed. I mean, you know, his work is made more difficult as well as everybody else's, but he's still going to have to keep doing what he was doing. And I certainly don't think he would have felt like a particularly honored member of the team by the way that this conversation went. Now let's think about Tina for just a moment and the kinds of thoughts or observations she might have about Devin. She might be thinking that, well, yeah, he's kind of naive, thinking that he could just fix this issue with some technology, and maybe even disrespectful. You know, he had a lot of youthful enthusiasm as he shared his observation of what the problem was. That might not have landed that well with her. And she might be thinking he's a little bit more of a kind of a know-it-all, who's kind of critical, and maybe a little bit too dependent on thinking that technology is going to resolve all of these kinds of issues. So if you think about it, what Tina really did was take kind of an old problem-solving approach to the situation. She didn't see this as an opportunity at all. She saw Devin's ideas as just something that kept her from doing more of what needed to be done. And so you can hear the focus is really just on shutting this thing down and getting Devin to do what she wants him to do as quickly as possible. And you can also see, I think, how the seeds of this conversation could start to create stereotypes on both sides. They're both going to be walking away with very limiting stories about the other person, which easily could be translated to limitations and stereotypes of an entire generation. So let's see what happens when Tina tries this from a different approach. So she's going to try again. Let's pretend that the first conversation never happened, and they're going to approach this one more time, only Tina is going to take a different approach. As she does this, once again, I want you to notice the interaction and focus on what makes this one different. And also, how is this going to impact Devin? What kind of messages will he take away from how this conversation goes? Once again, I'll debrief this with you at the end of this conversation, or excuse me, at the end of the listening exercise.
Hey, Tina, do you have a minute? I wanted to run an idea by you. I really think it'll help to address the communication problems we're having on our team.
Oh? What's the issue you're wanting to address?
Well, I think our team is struggling to meet our deadlines because we don't evaluate ideas together outside of our team meetings. We're really inefficient when we meet in person.
Huh. I suppose we do spend a lot of time doing updates and debating ideas in our meetings. You know, that used to work pretty well when our team was smaller and we didn't have so many projects.
I can see how that probably worked in the past. It doesn't seem to be working that well now, though.
I suppose you're right. We've been working that way for so long, I guess I hadn't thought too much about it. So what do you have in mind?
Well, when I was in college, we used a platform that enabled the people on our group projects to collaborate in real time. We were able to share ideas and comment on them outside of team meetings. You can even install the app and contribute from your phone. I'd like to see our team use that platform or something like it.
That's an interesting idea, Devin. I have to tell you, though, our team has a history of rejecting new technology. How would you address that?
Can't you just tell them to use the app?
I could, but I'm not sure that'll work out too well. Devin, how do you tend to respond when you're told to just do something because I told you so?
Oh, not too enthusiastically, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's true for pretty much everyone. People are far more likely to engage in change if they believe that they will benefit by doing something differently, and if they believe they can successfully attain that benefit. Knowing that, how would you approach getting the team to embrace using a new platform?
Well, let's see. Getting the specs right for the Elmira project is taking forever. I'll bet if I show everyone how using the collaboration feature can really speed that up, I bet they'd be pretty interested to learn more.
That sounds like a pretty good bet.
Cool.
Okay. Why don't you send me information on the app you're proposing so I can check it out? You'll need to run this by IT as well. Assuming we're good to go, I'll give you 15 minutes in next week's meeting to introduce your idea to the team.
Awesome. I'll be ready with some live examples to work with.
Terrific. I'm excited to see how this goes. I'm around this week if you need to run anything by me.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Sure thing.
So that was a really different conversation. Let's take a look first from Tina's perspective and what it was that she actually did that made this conversation turn out so differently. If you think about it, she stayed centered instead of getting knocked a little off balance by the way that Devin shares his observations with her. And so instead of reacting, she gets curious and starts to explore what it is that Devin's actually seeing. In fact, by asking about his perspective, she's able to sort of look through his eyes and see a pattern that has been there all the time that maybe she had not considered as much because she's so familiar with it. She remained open to possibilities and continued to explore what Devin had in mind and how that could impact the team. She also really focused on making this a teaching moment. She could hear how much Devin wanted to make a change and also noticed that how he was approaching that probably wasn't going to be as successful as he might have hoped. And so she used some coaching approaches to help him think about how he could introduce his ideas successfully to the team. And as a result, they learned with and from each other. Now let's think about this from Devin's perspective. What do you think his experience might have been? Well, certainly he'd feel much more encouraged about sharing his observations because they were so well received. He also would feel probably pretty respected for the innovation that he was introducing. And he learned how to introduce that innovation in a more effective way. So he would see this interaction as an opportunity to learn and grow, which most certainly he would find valuable. And in that way, he would feel more as a valued team member. So this approach that Tina used, we would call coaching-based leadership. That is, she integrated coaching approaches into the very conversation that she was having with him. And these were based on a coaching worldview. That is curiosity, compassion, and courage. So as Tina approached this conversation, she gets curious about Devin and what he has to offer and what he's sharing in a way that allows her to see possibilities she hadn't even seen before. And rather than judging him for being different, she extends compassion and honors his desire to make change, and that keeps the conversation and the learning space open between the two of them. And she approached this whole conversation with courage in that she was willing to hear a different idea, and she was willing to help support change in happening. And these are the cornerstones of a coaching culture. So when we talk about a coaching culture, what we're actually talking about is making coaching a way of life in the organization so that coaching approaches are integrated into any conversation with anybody at any time. As a result, people learn how to appreciate how other people see the world. All people, by the way, not just a new generation. When a coaching approach is taken to interactions, people approach differences as an opportunity to learn. And coaching can provide a language that allows us to have conversations about these differences without a big overlay of emotion. So when we take a coaching approach to these conversations, we're able to actually appreciate the differences, the gifts that people bring, with a focus on realizing that potential rather than seeing these differences as problems. And in doing this, this is what encourages people to think together, to innovate together, and to create together. Isn't that what we would want for Generation Z? This is an opportunity for us to welcome this really gifted group of people that have all kinds of potential within themselves and see the potential for moving our world forward in some really positive ways. I think that taking a coaching approach to welcoming Gen Z into our workplaces is going to help to realize that potential in some fantastic ways. Perhaps even more importantly, I think that taking a coaching approach to welcoming this generation could teach us all how to take a coaching approach to being with each other. And so we could use this new generation as a kind of a wave that we could ride into a new place that hopefully could even heal some of the old wounds of doing things not as well as we could have in the past, but also could create the opportunity for us to create a whole new shared worldview that could be very positive and very productive for us all. The key, of course, to doing that is creating a space where we can all learn with and from each other. And in doing that, I think that we will create a great place for all of us, that we will make this a place where change is possible and where everyone feels welcomed and honored. So I hope you'll take this opportunity as Gen Z enters your new workspace to welcome them with a coaching approach. Thank you. Mason, let me turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. Brilliant presentation, Diana. Thank you for taking the time to share these insights. Really good information. For our audience, it's time to move on to the next presentation. Please click on the link in the agenda widget on your screen or click the next link in your email. Don't forget to click Already Registered. All right, everybody. Thank you again. Diana Anderson, CEO of Cylient.